all so much. And I also want to just give everyone a gentle self-care reminder. Please go ahead and take care of yourself during today's session. Some of what we're going to address here today may be a little bit heavy, it may be some sensitive material. Please take care of you. There is on numberstory.org a little red box with a white bell on it. And that button, if you click it, will take you to crisis resources or some grounding tools that you may find useful. But probably if you need to, just go ahead, and if you find it useful to step away, take some breaths, get some water, take a break. And as we said, this will be recorded and shared out on YouTube if you find it something that you need to step away from and come back to later when it's a better time for you. We do welcome questions throughout in the chat, but as we said, we're probably going to, you may find it's answered by someone in the chat for you, or we may get to them at the end, or later we'll follow up and try to really get all of those questions answered for you. And I want to just take you through very briefly the agenda. We're going to meet and get to know very briefly a little bit about our partner, American SPCC, a little bit about the org that I'm with, ACE Resource Network, and the story of your number. We're going to take a mindful moment to get us started. We're going to hear about one young woman's story. We're going to then dive into the real heart of what we're talking about today, childhood adversity and ACEs. We're going to explore a digital resource hub, and then we're going to talk about some wonderful part where the hope comes in, resilience, some resources to take away, and then hopefully get to some questions and discussion. I'd like to welcome Genevieve Rivera from American SPCC to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about American SPCC.
Sure. Thank you, Joy. Hi, everybody. Genevieve Rivera here, and I'm the Executive Director of American Society for the Positive Care of Children, or American SPCC, as we're often known for short. I want to thank you so much for joining us as well. We're so excited to co-host this sharing session today, where we'll be discussing how trauma from our childhoods may be showing up in our lives as parents and caregivers. And our hope really is to provide you with opportunities to better understand your own experiences and ultimately either start or continue on your path toward growth and healing. Now at American SPCC, our mission is to empower parents and caregivers and help build brighter futures for our youth. And one of our main objectives is to help put an end to cycles of adversity. And we accomplish our work through 4 key pillars, which is prevention, education, empowerment, community, and advocacy. And through our partnership with Number Story, we're so proud to offer you today's session, as well as a free downloadable toolkit titled Your Child's First Chapters, which we hope will help you start this journey as early as possible. And Joy will be sharing how to access that a little later today. So I'm going to hand this back over to her. And if anyone is interested in learning more about us and our mission, we'll be sharing some tools and resources at the end of the session, as well as ways that you can connect with us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Genevieve. I am going to actually briefly turn things over to Sarah Maricos, the Executive Director of the ACE Resource Network.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We are really excited to be sharing the next 50 minutes or so with you. At the ACE Resource Network, it is our goal to increase awareness of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and other types of childhood adversity, and how common it is and how it can impact us our whole lives. And we believe that it's critically important for parents and people who care for young children to have an understanding of these things. So I'm just thrilled that you're all here, and I'm thrilled that Joy is going to lead us through an overview and provide some resources. And we hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And the ACE Resource Network launched a campaign called Number Story. You're going to hear that phrase used a lot today. And we're going to be helping you understand what the story of your number means. And I just want to give you a little bit of understanding first that the Story of Your Number campaign really set out to increase awareness of ACEs and other early adversity among adults, and bring that education forward. And we always want to do that with a message of hope. And that's one of the things that I really hope you hear threaded through our message today. I do want to tell you just a little bit about myself before we begin here. And I lead community engagement and learning for the ACE Resource Network. Before this role, I served as creative arts director with Child Parent Institute in the North Bay area of California, leading trauma-informed arts programs for young people and families. I've been co-parenting since my early 20s when my daughter was 2 years old. I'm representing today for all the step parents or informal step and bonus parents out there. She is now almost 21 years old. I am also the second oldest of 8 kids, and my siblings range in age from 16 to their mid 40s. And so I just want to offer, as we begin our learning session together here, that I'm very much on this journey with you. I am not a doctor. I am not a therapist. I am doing the best I can to care for the kids in my world and for my own inner child. And I hope that I can share some resources that can help you do the same if that's what you need. So I want to just invite us to sit together in a mindful moment. And I just want to offer this as an invitation to take a few breaths together. So wherever you are, if you could just help get comfortable. If it helps you to lower your gaze or close your eyes, that would be great. And I just want us to let our bellies be soft as we take a deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. And another deep breath in and out. And let's take one more breath in together. And just release any expectations that you might have, any pressure you might be feeling, any stress or tension or worries that you brought with you. Maybe it's what's coming up next. Maybe it's what this is already bringing up for you. Just let that go. All right. Thank you for joining me in that. Okay. You've heard probably the phrase come up, we all have a number story. As you've explored this training a little bit, or maybe you've heard of our org, numberstory.org, we all have a story of where we've been, what's made us who we are. And I want us to just take a few minutes to hear a little about one story from a young woman named Markeisha. She was inspired by the very topic that we're here to talk about today. And so I want to hear a little bit more from her and share that with you.
We all have a number story.
I'm from Backseat Bedtimes. gas station showers, the smell of uncertainty, a burden on my senses, 3 schools, 1 year. Wet dew on the grass lets me know it's time for school. I'm from late night cuddles with the family to beat the force of the piercing night wind. I'm from trauma, from I get it from my mama, feeling expanding guilt for wanting a better life than my mama. She did her best, now I do the rest. I'm from breaking down barriers. Why are there barriers anyway? White people who never went to college tell me I have to go to college to be somebody because Black girls work harder. Black girl, be smarter. Average doesn't make it. You have to be amazing. Don't ever be an angry Black girl. I'm from crying the first time I saw a sea. From fear, never shown, always felt inside. Don't show them what's inside. A little girl who never got a chance to live. I'm from rain clouds hit different in my neck of the woods. I'm from the hood where I never seen a rainbow or the silver lining. No crying, unstable, always fighting, mislabeled. Black girl, make magic from pain. Remember your name, handcrafted so you always have your family. Remember family. Remember the only thing that saved you was love and writing and the love of writing. Don't stop writing. I'm from unknown heritage I indulge in. My ancestors sit heavy in my soul. They mastered the arts that run through my blood, healed wounds with laughter and love, and I am still learning. I am from the womb of a goddess.
Learn more about your story at numberstory.org.
We believe that one of the most powerful things we can do is share our stories. And that's why we partnered with an organization that Markeisha belongs to called Get Lit. And we believe that, a lot of healing can happen when we hear other stories and we tell our stories. And we think it's really important to uplift young voices to inform for the care of children. So if that was inspiring to you, or you want to see more stories from young people, I'll send through a link in the chat where you can hear other young people's stories. So with that, Joy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And as this slide shows us, and as Markeisha's story alluded to, there is a beautiful healing that happens that takes place generations beyond us when we take this time to do the work that we're here to do today. And so our stories and our healing impact, they leave a legacy. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge what we really are here to do today as we dive into what can be some difficult conversations and some challenging work. So thank you for that. And thank you for showing up here and for your openness today. About that difficult work and that tough stuff, our daily experiences activate cascades of biological pathways. When those experiences are nurturing and enriching, they put us on a trajectory of wellness and resilience. So that's basically breaking down the idea that when what we go through, especially early in life, activate biological pathways. They activate things that happen in our body that shape our paths. And when those experiences are nurturing and enriching and positive, they set us out on a course to reap good things. And when those things that happen to us are challenging, are threatening, are adverse, they accelerate us down a path of early disease and even death. It sounds really bleak, I know. That's why we started with a little bit of that. What does the legacy of healing look like? Because this stuff is heavy. This stuff is challenging. But the thing is that it's so critical to know, because we have the power to shift our pathways, shift these trajectories. As I mentioned, this is especially true of our early developmental years, when our brains are being built and our bodies' systems are developing and they're calibrating. We're learning what the world is like. This concept is at the core of what is known as the science of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. The initial ACEs study was published by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and Kaiser Permanente in 1997. So it's been out there a while. It looked at 10 types of stressful or traumatic events, including, as you see here, physical and emotional abuse and neglect, sexual abuse, and growing up in a household with incarceration, with mental illness, substance use issues, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence or intimate partner violence. And looking at these 10 categories, it didn't count how many times those things had happened, just if they had happened at all. And it didn't count how old you were when those things happened, as long as it was sometime before you were 18. And what the study found was that ACEs were common, that nearly 2 out of 3 adults had experienced at least one of these categories of experiences, and more than 1 in 5 adults reported experiencing 3 types of ACEs. And the study found that ACEs can negatively impact physical, mental, behavioral, and emotional development. And it can have effects that last way beyond childhood, all the way through our entire lifespan. And what the science shows is that the higher our ACE score, so the more types of these experiences we have, there's a cumulative effect. So the more of these 10 categories we experience, the greater the odds become that we might experience these negative outcomes. Some of them are health associated conditions, like cancer, diabetes, depression, stroke, heart disease. Most of the leading causes of death, in fact, are associated with adverse childhood experiences. And if we experienced significant adversity or trauma without, there's a big key here, because this is where a lot of that hope comes in, without positive supports and interventions to help us out. So that's a big without. There can be more barriers for us in school and education, in work achievements and accomplishments, in relationships of all kinds, friendships, partnerships. And we can experience those health conditions that even impact how long we live. Something that we've learned since this study, and that many of us are familiar with and knew way before this study, is that those 10 ACEs are not the only kinds of adversities and stressors that we face as kids. At the core of ACEs is stress. And when that early adversity is severe or repeated and it doesn't go away, it can get under our skin. It can impact the way that we actually function, our body functions. And if we don't have enough support or buffers, again, that hope that comes in there, then that's where we see those effects come in. And there are other things, other influences outside of our household. Those 10 things really happen inside the home, right? For the most part, that's not always, because there can be abuse that occurs for sure. That's not just inside the home. But largely, we're looking at household challenges with many of the ACEs. But when we look beyond those 10, there are so many things that also impact the stress that we face as kids. Things like racism, things like discrimination that has to do with our identities. That could be being part of the LGBTQ community, that could be an ethnicity, that could be gender, poverty, dealing with community violence, bullying, intergenerational and cultural trauma. So passing that on generation to generation. Separation, so having to be apart from a caregiver for any number of reasons. There medical trauma. There's so many different ways that we're impacted outside of 10 ACEs. And what we learned is that often the impact can be the same. So you may not have seen something that you went through listed in the 10 ACEs and gone, wait, where is my story? I don't know if it's counted in one of those 10 that gets added up to give you what we call an ACE score, which is a number between 0 to 10 that tells you how many ACEs that you have. But you still have a number story, and we count all of these experiences as part of your story. And that story is really what we're talking about when we talk about how did our childhood and our childhood adversity impact you, and how might it be impacting the children in your life today. So we want to make sure that we understand when we talk about how does our number story impact us, we are not just talking about those 10 ACEs. So we're going to take a look at a resource that really holds all of this information and much more that we want to introduce you to. And it's called numberstory.org. And the story of your number is the story of your ACE history. And I would add plus some of those beyond the 10 experiences that we just covered. But that number doesn't define us. It's an entry point into our own personal story, and where it leads is up to us. It is not a defined trajectory. There is so much we can do to influence where our path is headed.
The site is also available in Spanish as a resource as well.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That's great reminder. This is those crisis resources I was mentioning earlier. As we take a look into the site, I want to show us the first thing that we were met with is a little video. What is a number story? We're going to take a look at that.
Let's start here. The story of your number is the story of your ACE history, a score used to measure the number of adverse childhood experiences that happened to you before the age of 18. ACEs fall into 3 categories: abuse, neglect, and household challenges, and are so common that 2/3 of us have at least one. A landmark study found the higher the number, the more likely one can experience negative health effects like heart disease, diabetes, depression, stroke, and asthma. The number is connected to an increased probability of lots of bad stuff. But you are not a number. The number is simply an entry point to your own personal story. Where it leads is up to you. ACEs are not your fault. They happen to us, but they don't need to define us. No person with a 2 is the same as another person with a 2. Each 7 is different from every other 7. Each of us is a unique story, and we each have the power to determine how our own story turns out. Explore the story of your number. Understand how it impacts the children in your life, and take control of where your story leads.
Joy, we can't hear you.
Thank you so much. Saying as we scroll down, we see the explanation of what are ACEs and then the additional um, causes of toxic stress that we just mentioned. And toxic stress is where I really want to land here. We all know that stress on its own, well, we may not all know, it feels like a pretty bad thing most of the time. But our body's stress response is really designed to give us an extra boost of focus and energy so we can tackle the things we need to in life. And so there is some positive stress that we have even as kids, whether that's going into class to take a test or playing a big game out on a um a sports game, whatever those challenges are we might have to face. And then there's tolerable levels of stress that are more intense. They might be big life changes or really tough stuff that we're going through, but when we have caring adults and we have things that can help us process those, they stay in a level that we really consider to be called tolerable because our body can handle them. It knows what to do with the stress hormones we make, with how our heart rate goes up, but it is able to return back down. We're able to process what our body does in those moments. Then there's a level of stress that a response that's called toxic. And that we know doesn't sound good, it's not good. That is when that challenging situation either doesn't end, or it's really severe, or it's repeated, or it's maybe during a really critical developmental time, and we don't have enough resources, whether that's an adult there to process, or it's a safe environment or community or space for us to really feel like we can work through safely what it is that we're going through. Our stress response stays active for too long, and it can hurt our bodies and our brains. It can change our behaviors over time. This can be due to those 10 ACEs we talked about, or any of those other factors that we mentioned that are beyond the 10 that can also have those same effects. There's an analogy that's been used by one of our lead advisor, Dr. Brooke Harris, has used it before. It's become pretty well known in the ACEs field, and it's called the bear in the house. So when we see a bear in the woods or something that's meant to be a dangerous situation, it's a very natural and good response that our body has when we have a response you might hear called fight or flight, or fight, flight, or freeze. Those are responses that our body is prepared for great danger, for a great threat. So if you think about some of those ACEs in our house, whether there's abuse, or maybe it's just a situation where it's very unpredictable, there's a lot of chaos. We're never quite sure when we can relax when we're young, and we are prepared to spring into action. Maybe it's to protect someone, ourselves, maybe a parent, maybe a younger sibling, and maybe our bodies are not able to calm down and stay in a state that we are really meant to be in, of relaxed most of the time. And we're actually more vigilant and in that fight, flight, or freeze state more often than we're really meant to be. And that's more like we're living with a threat like a bear in the house. And that's not really how the body system was meant to work. So we're kind of flooding our body with stress hormones over and over. Our heart's pounding and our blood pressure's up much more often than it's supposed to be. Over time, that kind of a response ends up actually doing some disruption to our organs, our tissues, our brain development. And it can end up limiting our ability to process information, to make decisions, to interact with others, and regulate our emotions. because we're kind of doing something else. Our system is kind of busy doing something else and staying in a different state than like we would be able to develop if our brain was focused on the normal process of growth and development through our childhood. So that kind of toxic stress response is really why all this kind of matters so much. The why should I care about my number story? When we have that severe ongoing stress happening, those disruptions to our development affect our brain and body. And this is here to help you go through some of that, to learn about, if you're interested, how this response affects our epigenetics, which is about our actual DNA and coding, that kind of stuff that we actually pass down and get passed down to us from our ancestors. So some of the traits we might have and stress we inherit might even come from things we didn't particularly experience firsthand. We might be already prone to some things from our ancestors, and we might pass them things on to our kids. Um, and we might also learn ways of coping from the world around us. And we might pass on how we cope to our kids as well. But the good news is we have learned that the effects of toxic stress are treatable and they're preventable. And all of that is built in here to the site too for us to learn in really broken down bite-sized pieces. But our physical and mental health can be affected. Our future paths can be affected, our potentials in so many ways. And our families can be affected, which is really, I think, what drew a lot of us here today. And we've got great videos, more to check out for you here. But I really do want to emphasize it's our biology and our behavior that we do end up inheriting and passing on. And being aware is the first step to being able to change some of that. If that's something that we're realizing, hey, I'm kind of realizing I'm doing some of that, and the impacts to us aren't always obvious. And that's why once we know and go, hey, I can make a choice to pass on healing, to pass on resilience. And that's what I want to be doing. How do I do that? Well, you can explore your number and actually check out what is my ACE score, if that's something that's of interest to you. If you go, I understand where I'm at. I realize what I went through, and I want to get into this healing part. What we have, I'm sorry for the scrolling, y'all. I know it sometimes makes people dizzy. This section here under Heal Myself is where you really can get into this journey for you. And I do suggest starting with Heal Myself, because as parents, as caregivers, we want to look at this like putting your own oxygen mask on first. When we're able to address our own experiences first, it can help us. The first and best thing we can do for our kids is model. And that when we model healthy ways to take care of ourselves, to manage our stress, we are teaching that to our kids. They're going to see that, remember that in moments when they're facing stress. And we can't begin to help them learn to regulate and navigate their worlds in healthy ways until we are able to do a little bit of that on our own with what we're facing. So I know sometimes for some of us it's really hard because it can feel selfish to put time into ourselves, and we want to give and give to our kids and go, how do I focus on them? I want to take care of their issues first. We'll get to me later. But I promise that it's taking care of you is taking care of them too. And it's really critical. And sometimes our issues, the impacts that we're facing aren't always obvious, but if we think about what are those things, is it my health, my mental health, my relationships, my partnerships? Is it career fulfillment, achievement, um, my work relationships? What are those kind of things that maybe you're feeling held back in or stumbling in? And maybe that's a path in for you. And maybe it's starting here with one of these 7 pillars of wellness in the Heal Myself area, that there are tools under each of these sections: healthy relationships, mindfulness, mental health care, movement, sleep, nature, and nourishment. And the great thing is, these very tools that help us heal are the same things you're going to see in the Help My Kids section that we want to build into a healthy routine to help kids manage and keep stress down for kids. So they're the same things that help kids build resilience. So if you can help build this into a family routine, you're helping you, you're helping kids, you're helping the whole family. So under each of these sections, for example, in mindfulness, we're going to find a little bit of explanation of how these things help us, especially if we've been through some tough stuff as kids, and some specific tools to try. They're simple, they're accessible, they're things that we don't need to put in major investments of dollars or big time hours and hours into, but they're things that we can start as little daily practices under each of these areas that can really all together start to shape ways to feel better, ways to take care of ourselves better, and ways that if we start to sort of build as a practice, they're ways that we're taking care of ourselves and our inner child. And just a note that I have heard that understanding your partner's childhood trauma and triggers is a love language. I affirm that. And I also want to assert that taking this time to understand your own childhood traumas and triggers is an ongoing act of self-care and self-love, and an act of love for others in your life. And so taking this time to care for you is, it's not selfish. It is sometimes salvation, and sometimes it is a gift to you and others in your life. I want to jump over to Help My Kids, because I know a lot of us, this is what really brought us here today. We know that caring for kids is so important. And as parents with ACEs, I just want to put out there that and acknowledge we may have already passed on some ACEs to our kids. Whether we have gone through or going through a divorce, many of us have mental health conditions, often as a result of our own upbringing or just who we are. And lots of us have faced substance use issues. And if we think about what our kids are going through in the world today and what they're facing, I mean, things happen that are out of our control. And when we think about adding those numbers up and go, my kid is already off to a pretty solid few, at least little handful of ACEs here, then what do? I am looking at this, I am looking at the odds and help. Where do we go? I just want to give you some real encouragement that there is so much in your power to do. I want to take a minute and watch a moment here called The Power of Positive Experiences. It's beautifully rendered, and I think it carries a message we really need to hear.
Childhood is a critical period of life. Those growing brains are working hard to make sense of each new moment and store things away for later. When a child experiences adversity, that critical development can be compromised in the moment and throughout their lives. Fortunately, just as adverse experiences can harm, positive experiences can heal and change the course of a child's life. Even one caring adult can help to create a safe and predictable environment, help a child to build coping skills, and foster resiliency. When adults are present in the moment, when we listen without judgment, and when we encourage natural curiosity, we can strengthen their sense of safety and well-being. Positive childhood experiences extend beyond the home too. Teachers, coaches, and friends who care are powerful protective forces. And don't underestimate the power of community and culture. Traditions, teams, and clubs can help build a healthy sense of self that lasts into a thriving adulthood. It's never too late to care for a child and help put them on the path to a healthy future.
With that in mind, I just want to show a few really quick things in here. Under my child's ACE history is where you'll find screeners that are help assess children and teens ACE history. It is a little bit of a different tool that is used for that purpose. There are some FAQs on raising kids with ACEs. And I do want to just take us quick, that building resilience toolkit is where you find those 7 pillars of wellness and helping build a routine for kids. And under helping kids manage stress, I do want to take us in here quickly. It's a really great part in here, signs of stress in kids and teens. And these tools, breathing activities, cool down corner, it's an alternative to a timeout corner, grounding techniques for kids and meditation for kids. It's some really useful stuff. I think we've talked a lot about how ACEs change our brains, our bodies. I do want to hit on this because it's about the impact on learning and behavior. Kids with 4 or more ACEs are about 32 times more likely to experience learning and behavior problems. The real takeaway I want to emphasize here is that it might be time to reframe the challenges that either you had growing up or your child may have or is having. And just some time to think about, does this lens illuminate anything for you? Does it release anything for you from your own past? Or does it help you see or potentially think about meeting your child's needs in a new way? Things like trouble concentrating in class, not completing homework, school failure and incompletion, learning disabilities. They are all so much more prevalent for kids who are having trouble with ACEs and other types of stressors that cause toxic stress. So just keeping that in mind, it's something to think about shifting our lens. And I want to just emphasize this: when it feels disheartening, that trauma changes the brain, remembering that healing changes the brain too. It's so essential to keep in mind that it's a scale, and our positive experiences matter too. And that in that number 1 there, parents and caregivers, through your supportive and responsive relationships with kids, you are powerful antidotes to the early adversity that kids face. You are powerful players in helping shape your kids' lifelong trajectories. And then number 2, the experience can change, even right down to how our genes are expressed. Strengthening our core life skills for kids can help shift the balance point of the scale. We can actually help make kids more resilient over time, so they're better prepared to bounce back. So it takes more negative experiences to kind of shift that trajectory, and it takes less of the positive things to keep them going in a good direction. These things can be social and emotional learning skills like communication and emotional regulation through positive activities and engaging them in supportive environments. So we have a lot that we can do to help kids stay and set them on on a good and healthy path. And then the more we can do to help reduce their sources of stress, to just help protect that buildup of toxic stress, of course, anything we can do. And you're not alone. It is not on you. It is a community effort. The more that we can do and advocate on behalf of kids, of course, that is something that we are here for in our org, and that ASPCC, American SPCC, is here for in their org. If there's anything we can do to help support you, if there's any way we can give you any more access to our resources or support in any groups you might belong to, PTAs, neighborhood groups, scouts, faith-based orgs, volunteer groups, please reach out and connect with us. We're happy to do that. Again, that toolkit, and I'm hoping someone could drop a link in the chat. It is a dynamic and thorough, comprehensive tool for caregivers that has lots on positive parenting, on development of young kids 0 to 5, and then a lot that we covered and didn't get to today about our number stories and building resilience and strategies for prevention and healing. I'd love you to take a dive into that. It's so much rich information. And I'd love if Genevieve, if you want to just say a couple more words about these resources that you have available at American SPCC and through the app stores.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Joy. I also wanted to add, if anyone is interested in taking the ACEs assessment themselves, as well as finding more information about it, its limitations, and how it can be used as a tool for building resilience, you can find the quiz on our website. So I'll post a link to that in the chat. And then in terms of our programs, so our programs are designed to provide resources to parents and caregivers to help them create safe environments and strengthen their knowledge and confidence before adversity strikes. And like as Joy mentioned, data has shown that at least one positive support person can act as a buffer against toxic stress. So through our Parenting Resource Center, if anyone's interested in finding positive parenting tools and support, our Parenting Resource Center is free up on our website. And right now, more than 75,000 people visit that each month for information and support. And we cover topics such as ACEs, positive parenting, bullying, child safety, mental health, and family relationship building, and many more. And then our partnership with the Happy Child app, it helps bring cutting edge research on positive relationship building to caregivers. And through short, impactful videos and interactive lessons, the Happy Child app is easy to use, it's free, and it's designed to help users connect with their families and help them raise happy, well-adjusted children. So you can find that on the App Store or in Google Play. And then to connect with us further, we encourage you to follow us on social media to stay in touch, stay updated, and additional resources and support. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. And, I know we don't have much time left. I know there have been some requests for sharing the presentation and sharing the recording, for sharing the slide deck, the toolkit. So we will make sure that everybody gets access to everything. And if there are some questions that went unanswered, we'll do our best, as I mentioned, to give answers to those. I do want to just take one last minute to thank everyone for your time, your courage, and even taking this step today to learn some more, your willingness to show up today for yourselves and to show up for the children in your life, and for the inner child in all of us who could still use some care. We see you and we honor you, and we thank you for being here. I encourage you to take a look at americanspcc.org and to take a look at numberstory.org. Thank you all so much for coming today, and all the best on your journeys.